Today's webcast is Learn How Clean Water Services Streamline Site Management with TerraTrak. Thank you for joining us. And today's agenda, we're going to go over brief introductions of the people you see here on screen, a high-level overview of the platform, the TerraTrak platform, which is currently in use by Oregon Metro and Clean Water Services. And then we will move into kind of specifically about how Clean Water Services is using the technology primarily with their site management. Then our friend Mr. Shepard will do an online demo, which will dive right into using Clean Water Services system to show you how that's going. And then we'll kind of end up with a kind of what's next for Clean Water Services, and then also Steve here will talk about what's next for TerraTrak customers, current and future customers. And finally, if you're interested in joining the TerraTrak community. The presenters, we have Brian Shepard. He's a GIS analyst at Clean Water Services, which is located in Washington County, just outside of Portland. Brian Knowles and Steve Rentmeester are both from Sitka Technology Group. Brian is a founder and managing partner. And then Steve is a senior product owner for the product solution TerraTrak. And with that, I think it's off to you, Brian. Oh, before you begin, I'm sorry. If you have questions during the course of the day's webcast, you can ask them via the Q&A panel. That's a quick way to type in your question, and I will interject them during the course of the webcast. But if you do, I'll also hold some for the end. So thank you. Now it's your turn, Brian. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Damon. Sorry, I lost audio for a second there. Hi, my name is Brian Knowles. I'm a co-founder and managing partner here at Sitka. Sitka has worked with many natural resource management programs like the ones listed here in our 8-year history. We're passionate about giving natural resource professionals exceptional software tools that help them get their critically important and complex work done. Over time, we've started to see some common patterns in data management practices, ones that we want to be able to share with the rest of the practitioners out there. One of these patterns is managing conservation and restoration activities at scale. The TerraTrak platform is built to support the project implementation workflow within your organization. The purpose of TerraTrak is to help you complete prioritized actions on schedule and within budget, coordinate with implementing partners, contractors, staff, and volunteers, all while integrating with your internal business support functions, things like invoicing, GIS, and other such feature functions in your organization. What do I mean by the TerraTrak platform? Well, we've been developing these types of tools for many years now, and the workflows that we see are similar, and we want to be able to put those into a package to share those with others. Rather than each organization starting from scratch, we're leveraging the prior development efforts by creating open, shareable, and integrated software platforms such as TerraTrak. We've worked with our clients and partners, Oregon Metro and Clean Water Services in this case, to grant licenses on their systems, so others can take advantage of the significant investments they've already made and to lower your cost to get started. TerraTrak is an enterprise-level conservation management platform for managing and tracking green infrastructure assets such as parks, open spaces, trails, urban forests, constructed wetlands, stormwater BMP structures, wildlife corridors, and other natural habitats. Leading organizations, as I mentioned, like Oregon Metro and Clean Water Services, rely on our platform to gain real-time visibility into site-specific data. And as we have seen, the key benefits of this are streamlining, aligning, increasing visibility, and enabling sharing. TerraTrak allows you to sustain change over time. As we all know, meaningful outcomes may take many years, if not decades, to be realized. Connecting actions to assets, this diagram illustrates how you can leverage TerraTrak-driven workflows that help you stay on top of critical actions for your green assets. These actions can include acquisition, assessment and inventory, planning and prescription, treat and restore, monitor and measure. Successful asset stewardship requires multiple types of actions applied in concert and effectively over time to achieve your overall goal. Now I'd like to send it over to Brian Shepard so he can share the clean water services experience with using TerraTrak.
Good morning. I'm Brian Shepard. I'm a GIS analyst at Clean Water Services. On the slide, you'll see kind of an overview of our organization as a whole. I work in the watershed management department at Clean Water Services, and we manage hundreds of stream site enhancement projects spanning over 100 miles of stream and encompassing tens of thousands of acres in the Tualatin watershed. Our project goals range from education and outreach, permit compliance, and enhancement of both stream function and riparian habitat. So we've been using TerraTrak to help track our site and project related data, such as native plantings, which total over 1 million annually, and our contracted revegetation activities. So as we've experienced exponential growth in our project portfolio over the past few years, we've struggled with methods of compiling and summarizing project-related data. As this slide shows, we were very reliant on paper for tracking access agreements, contracts, and invoices. And while we have robust software to track accounts payable for the entire organization, the detail needed by our department to manage our portfolio of projects was lacking. Compilation of this information was done in Excel, and scanned copies were tediously filed on a network drive in folders and files with complicated naming conventions. Most of the information was available, but it required time to organize and summarize to make it accessible. So until we began creating our revegetation contracts using TerraTrak, a convoluted process of contract preparation, review, and generation of multiple paper copies for signature existed. Likewise, invoices were reviewed and accepted through a largely paper-based workflow. Our implementation over the past few years of TerraTrak has greatly streamlined these processes and saved considerable amounts of staff time. We work very closely with our public affairs, regulatory affairs, and engineering departments on a number of these projects, as well as a large number of external partners. Our ability to track ongoing expenditures, management actions, and the number of plants that we're planting was mostly relegated to Excel. Because of that, much of the data were time-consuming to detail and often out of date. We were able to provide information to internal and external partners at specific times as necessary, but often ad hoc summarization and reporting was difficult.
Steve Rentmeester at Sitka Technology Group. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall timeline of the TerraTrak project, and then I'll turn it over back to Brian to talk about the CWS implementation. So TerraTrak started back in 2010. The project was kicked off with two of our managing partners here, Brian and Matt, doing a data diagnostics over at Metro. The data diagnostic is a effort to understand the information that's generated and how is that information summarized and reported. And more importantly, the people who are doing that work. Who are the folks who are generating the information, and what are the pain points in trying to generate or compile that information. So the data diagnostic identified what are the key spots where a software could help improve workflow and information. The key finding out of that was that acquisitions was the place where they wanted to start. So Metro started in 2011 on formalizing their acquisition process and building software, TerraTrak, to support that. In 2012, We moved on to supporting site management, which is the core of what we'll talk about today. 2013, Metro moved on and started doing work efforts or work orders under the site management. 2014, CWS came in and we rolled out the material management, built the material management piece for them, which eventually we rolled in 2015, rolled out to Metro. Budgeting started back in 2014, and this past year we've been rolling out the site management for CWS, and we'll start rolling out the budgeting currently for CWS. So a good history and a lot of functionality already existing in the system, supporting 2 different organizations. Brian, I'll pass it over to you.
Before that, Steve, this is Damon. I do have a question, just kind of a clarification question regarding the site management, the work efforts, material management, which I'll just interject here. We did do a webcast last year with Margaret from Clean Water Services, which really kind of dived deep into material management, which was worth checking out if you didn't see it already. But all these different modules, how do they interact? You know, how are they all available for customers, or kind of the question I've received?
Yes, so we can turn on the modules individually. Commonly when we onboard a new tenant, we think about kind of a gradual turning on or implementing these pieces. One of the big challenges is organizational change, is just helping the tenant or the client be able to implement or roll that out within the organization. And so doing it incrementally over time is recommended. But all of the modules are available for new tenants.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I second Steve's answer to the question, and looking at the portion of the timeline that's Clean Water Services specific. Back in 2014, we received a license agreement from Metro to begin using TerraTrak, and we had a goal of planting over 2 million plants within the watershed that year. And so that's the reason that we kind of developed the material management module for TerraTrak during that time. And it ended up being very instrumental in our ability to track the deliveries and allocation of that plant material for that given year. With that having been built in 2015, Metro adopted that module, and it's an interesting environment working on this software, because Metro and Clean Water Services have been continuing to develop additional functionality while also refining our tenant-specific areas to each organization's specific needs. So Metro had adopted the material management, just as an example, module in 2015, and they track far more materials than we do to projects. So they were able to take what we had already built and customize it for their needs, leveraging the work that we had already done. So there's a lot of shared development and lots of leveraging other work that organizations have done. Last year, we started working on more holistic site management within TerraTrak, as well as projects that occur on those sites. We're currently working in that now. We've developed processes for revegetation contracting and invoicing in concert with some other process improvements internally, like digital signature on the contracting. And I'll go into more of that during the online demo, which is coming up next. Currently, we're working on adding budget tracking within and across our projects, and that'll provide much greater summarization, analysis, and reporting on a project-by-project basis for project managers, as well as the ability to roll up that information across projects for higher-level department manager budget tracking in real time.
I did get a question on this slide. The question was regarding the development and how is that managed, and especially with the multiple partners with Metro and Clean Water Services in this case.
I'll grab that one. Steve, Rentmeester again. So currently each client has their own budget, their own set of deliverables. If any deliverable from one client may have a impact on the other client, we describe that and decide whether or not we need to have a joint meeting with both clients to discuss the requirements. Commonly, I act as the kind of the facilitator between those discussions to gather requirements from the key client who's funding that functionality, and then communicating that to the other tenant or the other client. And as much as possible, we're really trying to focus on what's the process as a whole, and building the system so that it's configurable to the tenants. So we have workflows, and within that workflow are the requirements. So a lot of the details of what are the requirements are configurable to the client, to the tenant. So yeah, we're aiming to build a system that supports generic workflows, and then we can customize those workflows to the client itself. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that was helpful. For the person who asked that question, if you want further clarification, just let me know, and we can handle that. Okay, so I think now we're off to Brian, your demo.
All right, sounds good. And Steve, feel free to jump in here if I omit something as I'm going through here. I'm starting off in the dashboard for one of our project managers. This is typically where TerraTrak launches when someone logs in. As I don't manage projects or habitat enhancement projects anyway, I don't have anything populated in here, but I'm viewing the data for one of our project managers. And there's very easy access to all of the active work efforts he has, any open invoices. If we were in planting season, there would be a lot of material requests in here that he's put out in an attempt to acquire plants from our bulk plant purchases for his specific projects. Yeah, and kind of this has become the go-to screen for all of the users in Clean Water Services instance of TerraTrak to see kind of what's going on currently and what needs their attention. So this is really, really helpful and has replaced a lot of email notifications back and forth between people. So throughout the system, and this has been a really huge benefit to us, contracted tasks and rates that we perform on our projects are specified by multi-year master agreements that our organization has with a number of different contractors. And kind of on the more back-end area of the system that I help administer, they're housed in this area, and the tasks and rates are specified for a given rate period, which usually spans 1 or more fiscal years. For the purposes of this demo, we made up a contractor with rates and tasks so that we weren't providing that information publicly, but you can kind of get in here for this particular contractor that we have, see the rate periods. All of these tasks are specified in multi-year master agreements. So every contractor is bid on the same rate or the same tasks, and we have specified rates for both work that's done outside of the Oregon's Bureau of Labor. So we have a couple different rate categories specified depending on whether we need to specify prevailing wage rates for a particular work effort or just the regular cost of those tasks. Kind of getting into where we actually do all the work within TerraTrak. I'm looking now at our Wapato View project, which is underneath the Wapato View site. And to differentiate sites and projects, I think of sites more as essentially like a collection of tax lots or parcels where we have agreements in place to do specific work. And that work is contained within a project. And they're defined with certain goals, and all of the work that's done is tied to one or more of these individual projects underneath a site. Looking over at this portion of the screen, hopefully you can see my mouse moving around. There's a number of sashes that can be expanded to display far more information about any of these particular topics. I find it often easier, especially if I'm going to a particular section, to collapse all of these so that I can see them all and navigate between them pretty easily, but they are totally expandable. And kind of walking through this quickly, we've got some basic information about the project, which may typically span multiple years, even decades, depending on where we want to go with this. We're able to specify the project manager, a peer reviewer. So all of our work efforts that are created for the contracted activities actually go through another project manager to make sure that the tasks that are specified are applicable for the goals. And we have a couple of really experienced project managers that help others out in that respect. There's kind of a step involved in the workflow that allows somebody else to take a look at it before we just send somebody out to do work. And then we specify a department manager whose main role is responsible for approving this work given budget constraints. We can also track a lot of information about contacts within our organization or other external contacts. We partner with a lot of external agencies on our projects, including Metro. Metro owns a lot of property within Washington County, and we do a lot of the revegetation on their behalf. So having this available, if someone's out of the office, another staff member can log into TerraTrak, go to the project. If there's project-specific questions, they'll know who to contact. And then stepping through the rest of this project planning stage is where we're going to be able to estimate spending for fiscal years coming up. We're just now getting ready to turn that on in advance of July 1, which will be our fiscal year 18 turnover. It gives project managers the ability to estimate spending across various project stages. So we could go as far down as looking at design and engineering, permitting, construction for, say, trails or stream reconfiguration. And then we get into some of the stages that are more tailored to our revegetation efforts. So prepping the site by doing invasive weed treatments, and then getting into the actual planting and establishment of the site, which is usually like spot sprays and much smaller weed treatments, planting activities, that sort of thing. And then per our spending categories for each of these stages, project managers can put in the estimated budgets, submit that to the department manager, and get approval for those budgets, which then constrains all of the work efforts and the materials that they're going to put on that project to the approved budget, which is really nice. And we've been really lacking in that previously. We've had we have budget estimates, but they're not tremendously accessible. And having the ability to do this within this system, as well as look across projects for any particular funding source that we may have internally to track budgets, is going to be hugely helpful in this coming year. This is something that's currently in development, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Throughout the system, we have specific places where we're able to upload documents. This is kind of a catch-all for some of the planning documents and things, and this is incredibly helpful, kind of getting back to the decentralized data slide that we had before. Having a file folder with paper copies of all the files and trying to look through that to get this information was hugely time consuming and inefficient. So now we're able to house all of the documentation that we have for a particular project or site right here within the system for easy retrieval. Getting down to the work efforts, you can see that for this project, we've got 4 work efforts put in the system currently. You can see start and end dates, who the contractor's with, the status of all of those, who the manager is, when it was approved, and a tremendous amount of overview information about all the work efforts that we've done for a particular project, consolidated into a nice, neat area within the system. I'll dig into a couple of these that we prepared for the demo right here. So looking over in this navigation tree, we've kind of gone from the site level down into a specific project, and now we're looking at one of the 4 work efforts that we have for this project. Again, they're organized into sashes, and typically when you create a new work effort, or when you're going through any of these processes, they're logically laid out. So you start at the very beginning in the basic section and just kind of work your way down. You've got work effort names, when the work is scheduled to start and end. I'll also note up here, this is really helpful. There's a lot of contextual information that's provided within TerraTrak. These green check marks means that any required field up here that is necessary for moving on to another step has been completed. If you hover over this, you'll get some information about the roles that can complete these items and whether it's complete or not. If it's not complete, there will be a red X, and it actually tells you why it's not complete, which is really helpful from my perspective, providing support to other users here. It serves as a great way to provide self-help. If you can't figure out why you need to progress to the next section, often just hovering over those will give you information about what is incomplete and needs to be done. Additionally, there's little kind of generic hover-overs that provide descriptions of what this section means and what type of data is appropriate to be in there. So again, for each work effort, we have a section of contacts, and this pre-populates based on those users that were specified in at the project level. So because we had populated the project manager, peer reviewer, and manager at the project level, this work effort then pulls in that information. But we do have flexibility so that we can change these as needed on an individual work effort basis. And there's a lot of places within the system that do the same thing to help facilitate data entry. Moving down a little bit, we get into our contractor selection section. So we've selected the welcome back water contractor that we created for the demo. We can provide comments on why we chose that contractor for this particular work effort. The contractor contacts are available, so we know who within that contractor organization is responsible for actually doing the work, what their point of contact is, and we can provide contact information, phone numbers, emails that are all tracked kind of on the back-end administration side within here, which is really helpful, especially if a project manager is on vacation, somebody needs to contact the contractor that's working on a specific project. All of that information is in here, providing a great deal of transparency throughout the department and allowing us to answer questions and resolve issues much more quickly than we had been able to in the past. In addition to just providing some notes about the contractor selection, we have some defined justifications that our legal department likes us to use to indicate why this contractor was specified for this particular project. And again, these are very similar to Metro's, and they were customized to reflect our legally agreed upon contractor selection justification categories.
Ryan, if I could jump in for a second.
Yeah.
This is one example of an area where I believe your workflow got a little smoother, more efficient, that having TerraTrak and the ability at the end of this process to be able to evaluate contractors, report on that contractor evaluation, resulted in the contractor selection justification process becoming a little smoother and easier for you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one example of where we were very intimately involved with our legal department and working through the customization of this to make sure that what we were doing was acceptable to them. And it's provided much improved workflows. We were working with Excel and Word-based templates to create these work efforts previously. They were disconnected, so essentially it was up to the user to select a contractor, provide justification, select all the tasks, and then copy and paste that into a Word template that became the contract. And hopefully they didn't overwrite the template, they provided the right data, they didn't get confused and save it as the wrong name. This process has greatly simplified the review that we do of these, both at the department manager level and on our legal team as well, because they're just entering the information in here, and then the contract is being populated by the data that were entered. So there's no ambiguity about or discrepancy between what was put in here and what actually shows up on the contract. So now it's not a question of having to read everything word for word to make sure that it was all put together correctly. We just get a report at the end that has all the information that was put in and was both peer reviewed and accepted by the managers. And I'll get into more detail on that in just a little bit. This area is where we select those tasks that I was showing you before. So back over on here, we have a bunch of tasks that the contractor is approved to do. They've bid on rates, they've been accepted. And we have the rates locked in for a specific period. Moving back over here, it's just a matter of, I can probably go through this, adding a task, so this drop-down menu mirrors what I was just showing you, and there's no way that a user can select something that wasn't approved by doing this. The TerraTrak provides so much validation of the data that was entered. It's really helped in the review of these things and making everything consistent across all of our work efforts. And just to give you a sense of scale, we typically cut several hundred work efforts in a fiscal year. And this process has dropped the amount of time from creating them to getting signatures from probably a couple weeks to a couple days. in going through this, we've also adopted some internal processes that are helpful, which is mostly in using DigiSign to electronically send these prepared contracts to our contractors for signature, instead of having to mail multiple copies and having them returned to, and putting the paper copies into a folder and scanning the rest so that the project managers have them. Right now, we're also working on the budgeting, which helps us provide project level budgets specific to our multiple funding sources that we have, depending on whether they're coming out of a capital or operating budget. We have a number of codes that we're tracking all of this information to, and we can see which funding sources were applied to this particular work effort. Oftentimes we'll have multiple funding sources depending on the work being done and whether or not we're getting reimbursed from another organization for doing work as a partnership with them, how much of the work effort was applied to each of those budgets, and then what the total funding allocation was from that.
Brian,
yes.
Just a quick question. So the budgeting that you just showed here, is that part of the site management module, or is it part of the budget module that you guys just rolled out in 2017?
I can take that one.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so the site management includes the project definition and the work effort, creating the work effort. And then the budget module is an additional module that for CWS we're turning on for FY18 starting July 1st. And that additional module supports defining a budget for the project, as well as tracking budget across the entire program by funding source. So turning it on for the project level budgets, it allows the division manager to delegate X amount of budget to this project. And that way the division manager can kind of step up a level and just manage projects or budgets across projects without having to necessarily keep track of all the details on each individual work effort. The project manager then takes on some of that responsibility of keeping track of all the individual work efforts and material requests. So helps to kind of separate and delegate responsibility.
Thank you.
So once the project managers kind of identified all of the tasks and the funding to perform those tasks on a project, they'll upload a map of the project area so that we'll have that in the contract, and I'll show you that a little bit further along just for the sake of time here. And this gets the work effort to a stage where it's ready for peer review. Once the project manager submits it for peer review, the person that's defined as the peer reviewer gets an email notification. I believe it also shows up on their dashboard as something that needs attention. And those notifications serve to expedite this process. So as soon as the peer reviewer gets a notification, they'll go in here, review the work that's going to be done, make sure it's applicable to the project, and then specify whether or not they have any conditions for the approval. In this case, this one was good to go. They agree with the tasks that were selected. They select no, hit approve, and it goes over to the department manager just to double check that the funding sources that were provided and the budget that's required to do these tasks is acceptable. And then they approve it. It goes on to the next stage with our administrative assistant getting a notification This process, we haven't been able to integrate fully with the rest of the organization, like for our finance department and our legal departments. So currently this is a bit of a manual process outside of TerraTrak, but our admin assistant will work with finance. Actually at this stage, they'll work with legal to get a unique contract number for that work effort, which they put in. And then as soon as that's ready to go, they'll generate contractor instructions, which are, that this serves as the contract to do the work with our contractors. And I'll just open this up and go through it. We had a review process with our legal department to get this wording correct and make sure that all of the information that was needed was included on here, such as that contract number that was just included, an expiration date, to not exceed amount, as well as contacts for clean water services and the contractor that we're doing work with. Again, all of this comes straight from the system, and that's a huge improvement to what we had before, whereas people were trying to create this in Excel and then copy and paste it into a Word document that legal really had to scrutinize to make sure that everything was done correctly in the process. Now it's generally accepted that any of these documents that come out of TerraTrak follow our formatting and have the data that's required to get this out. The site
Brian,
yes.
it looks like the PDF or the thing that you popped open, it's all kind of grayed out. I don't think there's probably a way that we can remedy that for the this call, but maybe kind of explain what's there, or just know that it's hard to, you can't see it.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it says that I need to move this away from the shared application. So that's interesting. Well, I'll close that. And essentially all of the information that we've entered, this contract number, the tasks and the rates, and then going all the way back up to the basic information, the start and end dates, were all included on there, as well as some boilerplate language that refers to, you know, who's held responsible and all these other things that legal wanted on there, as well as it takes a copy of this sitemap that was uploaded, and I don't know if that will show up. No, it doesn't look like it, but essentially it's a map of the project area. So that way there's no confusion about where the contractors are supposed to perform the work. And this has been really helpful as well, if we have a task that requires herbicide usage, such as this hourly spray task, we, actually that's getting down into the invoicing, we also append a spray log to the contract. So the contractor has a current version of our spray log, a map of where to perform the work, and all of the information that's needed on both sides to get that work out. After the work's been performed, we kind of get into the invoicing side for this particular work effort. I guess I'll stop opening these since they don't appear to show up, but one of the requirements we have for any spray work that's been done is a completed spray log needs to be submitted with each invoice that the contractor provides. So when we get an invoice back, we also get a spray log, and that spray log goes directly into the system here. That way, for if we were ever audited by the state and required to provide information on the pesticide application that we have, all of that information is housed in here, and we can get back to it. The admin assistant, once the contract's created, works with finance to get a purchase order number for this contract. She puts that in here, and then as the project manager receives invoices from the contractor, a couple of things happen. The spray log will get uploaded, and then for each invoice, we'll enter some data. We're able to partially invoice tasks, which happens occasionally. The contractor may only be able to do a portion of the work that's specified, or even a portion of a given task. So if we have, these are both hourly tasks, but we also have tasks that are based on per acre rates. And if a contractor is only able to do 20 acres of the 40 acres and they want to invoice us for that this month, and then the remaining 20 acres the next month, we're able to do that. So on each invoice, we select the tasks that are on the invoice that we receive, how many units had been done of that work for each. And here you can see this was a partial invoice. We had specified 25 hours of hourly spray work, and the contractor is currently only invoicing us for 10 of those. So we put that in. We don't have to worry about the rates because those are specified, and all of the money, all of the finance information just pulls over from those rates that were already specified. There's no need for the project managers to worry about that. And this also provides a means to compare what our system assumes these tasks would have cost based on those rates, and the actual invoice amount that the contractor has on the invoice. So there's a check within TerraTrak to make sure that the contractor is actually charging us the correct amount. We also have the ability to track materials that were used by the contractor on the sites. In this case, it looks like we may have sprayed some glyphosate out there. This ideally would go on the spray task, but we are able to capture this. How many units were used and what the cost was. This provides a tremendous amount of data that we didn't have before, tracking in great detail any chemicals that were used. And now we know when they were used, where they were used, and in what quantity. This section kind of gets down to all of the tasks overall. Because we're able to just partially invoice, it's possible that we may have overestimated the number of units that were required to do the work. In this instance, if we were fully invoiced out, we had specified like 25 hours of hourly spray, but we only did 10. This allows us to mark that task as complete so that we can close this out later on. I think probably in the interest of time, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit going through the rest of this. Most of these areas have a closeout process. So at some point, we no longer want to do any work on this, and we kind of want to archive this work effort, get it off of the project manager's dashboard as something that's active, and make sure everything was completed, and just put it out of their minds. And this will certainly come in towards the end of the fiscal year. We'll be closing out a lot of work efforts that were specific to just one fiscal year. This one's not able to be closed out right now, and you can see that the contractor evaluation section hasn't been completed. Here's who can enter that information and what information needs to be provided to complete that. It kind of gets us to the end of the work effort, and hopefully through the contracting and invoicing section. Steve, is there anything else that you want to add that I may have missed going through there?
No, I think you covered projects and work efforts, the core of the site management.
Okay. I think with that, for the sake of time, we might be able to move along.
Well, thank you. I'll resume sharing the few remaining slides that we have. That was really informative. Okay. So I think you can all see the screen, correct?
Yeah.
And then you had a few additional slides. Brian, do you want to still address these briefly?
Yeah, I think I can go through these pretty quickly. So
okay.
Margaret, our plant manager, did a full webcast on this, I believe, about a year ago. So there's far more detail here, but just to kind of show you the other end, we're mostly focused on the materials that go to the projects and then the contracted work that we do on those projects. So getting into the material side, this is just the main material inventory grid showing all of the species we have, how many we have on hand at a given location, how many we have on order, and then how many of those have been allocated to projects already. It allows her to really easily go through and look at all the requests and allocate plants where necessary.
So next slide, right?
Yes. And so back looking again at a project within a site, we were looking at the work effort portion previously. Now there's another section for material requests that show all of the plants that have been requested, how many there are, as well as all the cost information. And again, this is all tracked to a funding source that we have set up. We also implemented a calendar view of all of those material requests that show plant delivery and pickup timing per location, because we have a couple different plant locations that we receive inventory into. And that's allowed for much tighter scheduling and greater efficiency of staff time, being able to go out to these various locations. And so hopefully we're getting towards this with the work effort information and the financial information we have overall for these projects. This is an example of visualizing the data that we've exported out of TerraTrak for plants. We have 7.5 million plants recorded in TerraTrak going back about 10 years. And currently, because we have a defined planting season, I'll export that data at the end of the season and integrate it with information that we have internally, and then update these to provide all of our internal staff numbers on what we've been doing. This is just an example of the integration using that same data set, but visualizing it a little bit differently. It allows project managers to go into a specific project and see not only how many plants have been put out there per year, but what the stock type was. And you can even dig down into each individual species, saying how many of a particular species had gone out and in what form. So I touched on it a little bit. Clean Water Services this year is kind of addressing a couple areas to improve the reporting within the system that meets our organization specific needs. We've adopted some of these modules and have started entering a tremendous amount of data, but we do have specific reporting requirements that are specific to Clean Water Services that we're working on. Another area is we're kind of digging into the ability for contractors to invoice directly into TerraTrak rather than sending invoices via email or snail mail to the contractor or to the project managers. Contractors ideally would be able to log directly into TerraTrak and just submit the invoices from those work efforts.
So next steps for TerraTrak as a platform, we'll be working on web services. The goal here is to help improve and support data integrations with other systems in the organization, so GIS, financial systems, and data reporting systems. We'll be working with Metro to develop workflows for supporting the sale of properties and property line adjustments. We'll be working with CWS on line item budgeting, so doing away with the Excel spreadsheets that project managers use to generate their budget request, and getting that info into the system. And then we're aiming for some data diagnostics works with new clients and onboarding additional clients. So that's what we're looking forward to in the coming year.
And data diagnostic is just kind of a, could you provide a quick, explain what that is briefly?
Yeah, it's an opportunity to sit down with a new client and discuss what are the reports and information that they use to make key decisions. Who are the folks that compile those reports? Who are the folks that generate that information? And where does the pain, what's the pain they experience? So really trying to identify what's the high value work that we can get started with.
Great, I think that's helpful. Well, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to provide today's webcast for our listeners. I do have a question that I held, but I did want to let people know that if they do have questions they would like to ask, we'll have time for one or two. Let me first do this one, and then I will see if there's another one for us to continue with. But what kinds of internal business support functions does TerraTrak interact with? Maybe Brian Knowles, maybe you could take that one?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. TerraTrak's aims squarely at managing green assets. We're not trying to take over financial systems or GIS systems or data analysis systems like Brian demonstrated just now. We want to work together with those systems and feed this information to those systems and take information in from those systems in a way that your whole system ecosystem works together. So you get the best financial system, you get the best GIS system, you get the best green asset management system